Hey guys, so welcome to video 3 for Unit 20.4, Hoover and the Great Depression. The last video, something seemed to happen, and it didn't pick up my pen, my online marker. So I apologize for that, but hopefully it's explanatory enough for you guys to get through it and kind of understand what's going on. Um, so this last one I said would be short, sweet, to the point. It kind of was. It was a little bit long, but I think it was very to the point. This one I'm going to try to make shorter by skimming even further. So, like I said in the last video, Hoover did meet with business leaders, and again, he is going to ask them on the same ideas, just volunteer, right? To voluntarily maintain wages and employment. All right, so essentially just like be good people and keep wages up and don't lay off your workers. But in reality, that was not the case, and many companies could not do that either, again because the business leader did not want to, or because the business financially couldn't keep their workers, especially at the wages that they were accustomed to before the stock market crash. If you remember, we talked about that in the 1920s, that wages were going up and that businesses were paying their workers more than they really ever had been before. That idea of welfare capitalism. And now that's coming back to bite everyone in the butt because we can't keep the wages as high, and now people aren't making enough money, and it's having a very negative effect on the economy. Um, I'm sorry, I have a really stuffed up nose. Uh, so with that being said, Hoover is going to try to do a couple of other things. In 1930, he set up the Emergency Committee for Employment. Again, that's going to look to try and find ways to keep people as employed as possible. And again, it's not really enough. This is a big one, though. This is the most important thing on this slide right here. In 1930, something that Hoover is going to do is the Hawley Smoot tariff, and that is going to be pretty much the highest tariff the United States has ever placed on foreign countries. So again, that idea of Republican policies, we talked about it in the beginning of the 1920s with a tariff to help protect American goods. I'm going to pause. Hopefully, you guys remember which tariff that was. Anybody? The Forney Macumber tariff, the cucumber tariff, as we called it in class. This one is going to far surpass that, and we're going to see huge tariffs placed on foreign countries so that we can try to protect American goods. And this is going to turn out to be very detrimental for the economy, not just in the United States but the world. We see here 33 countries have this tariff kind of put on them, and it was ruined. It ruined foreign economies. This is in 1930, so I really want you to take a second. I was going to put an activity in here, but I just want to be kind of as direct as possible. 1930, these tariffs happen. What major events happen in both Europe and Asia over the course of the next 2 or 3 years that really shows effect of how bad those tariffs were on other countries? I just want you to think about that for a second. You don't really have to write anything down, but hopefully this is the connectivity, right? This is that last C. Hopefully you can realize, like, okay, this happened in 1930. Something else happened in this place in 1932 that forced them to act a certain way. So hopefully you can kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. If we were in class, we'd have a bit of a discussion about this, but unfortunately, that's not our reality right now. If you're confused about kind of what I mean by that or where I'm going with that, book me on an appointment on Wednesday and we'll talk about it, because there's some pretty obvious answers. At least I think they're obvious answers as to how that affected other countries. Let's move ahead. Hoover's strategies failed miserably. Again, companies were not going to voluntarily keep their wages up, keep employment up. Swarms of people flooded private charities and food shelters and food banks and welfare agencies and churches and all of these things. The lines got tremendous because so many people could not really support themselves during the Depression. Um, All right, I'm sorry, I had a cough there for a second. He did two more things: the Revenue Act in 1930, where he tried to essentially cut government spending in certain places, and then increase taxes to try and help support workers whose wages were being cut. This didn't work. Again, this is a lot of people call far too little, too late. If you don't know, I know that I've said this in class a couple times. 32 is going to be the apex of the Great Depression. It's going to be the absolute, well, low point, high point, low point, kind of whatever way you're looking at the graph. But it's the worst part of the Depression. So something this insignificant really didn't go a long way in helping to fix anything. He also had the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the RFC. Which tried to pump money into the economy by giving private loans to things like banks and railroads and insurance companies and all these things that were negatively hit by the Depression. But again, that was far too little, too late. Something that comes off the back of these ideas are public works projects. So I'm going to pause for a second. What is it called when the government uses money to help pump money into big business and infrastructure projects that'll help create jobs? I'll pause a second. All right, the answer is pump priming. It's pump priming is a democratic idea. It's kind of the opposite of laissez-faire, but he's going to try and bring these ideas of pump priming into the economy through public works projects. And one of the biggest public work projects that Hoover is known for is the Hoover Dam. He tries to create jobs by building the Hoover Dam, which is where it gets its name from. But again, all of these projects that he does are far too little, too late. Anything in 1932 by Hoover is just going to be evidence that he did not do enough in time to really make a difference. And then what he did wasn't that big. It was a drop in the bucket, if you will. Here's an example of those lines. So this is giving away free coffee and donuts to the unemployed. Again, this idea of volunteerism and charity, and you could see just how long and expensive the lines were. It didn't really do anything. There were far too many needy people for a charity organization to really stay on top of. This is kind of a funny saying of Hoover, and it kind of shows a bit of how naive he really was. This is going to be his big saying: prosperity is just around the corner. So again, it fits into that idea of rugged individualism, of putting yourself up by your bootstraps and kind of make the best you that you can. Um, he kept on telling the American people that this is the ebbs and flows and the market will fix itself, and prosperity is just around the corner. We were doing so well. This hurts a little bit, but we'll be doing well again in no time. He thought that the U.S. economy was fundamentally sound. He thought that the consumer economy would bounce back, and by doing things like tariffing other countries, that he would protect the products, and eventually the era of consumerism would come back around. But again, this wasn't the truth. We needed far more government intervention that he planned on, and he really wanted to give to get us out of this terrible, terrible depression. All right. This is a little bit of summary again. What he kind of planned on doing: volunteerism, rugged individualism. Those are two pretty big words that you need to know from Hoover and his presidency. Prosperity is just around the corner. He does believe in the business cycle, but he does try to intervene at the same time. So he's going to call out for war debts in 1931 to try and get money coming in from other countries. But again, the countries don't really have the money to pay, especially not in full. So that doesn't really do a ton. He tries to balance the United States budget and cut government spending in certain places so that and levy more taxes so that he can raise money to help balance wages and put an influx of money into the economy for pump priming ideas and public work projects. Evidence of that is the Hoover Dam. But again, that's just really not enough. Um, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was a thing. Again, didn't do enough. So all these things that Hoover did, eventually he realizes that he has to become more hands-on, but it's too little, too late. and he doesn't really do anything to help out the economy. If anything, the economy just gets worse as he's in office. These are the last two big things from Hoover and his presidency, and they're kind of both the nail in the coffin. The first one is called the Bonus March. So essentially, what this was, and I'm going to make this as short as possible. What the Bonus March was World War I veterans who went to Washington D.C. to try and get their pension checks early. So they were hurting. They were owed money from the government at a certain point in time. They tried to get those payments a little bit early so that they can kind of feed their families and whatnot. The bonus marchers, the bonus army, they're both referred to as the same thing. They grow in size very, very quickly. And the more and more of them that got there, the more of Washington D.C. they took up, and they were camping right in front of the White House, kind of protesting for the money that they felt they were owed. They just again wanted it early. Congress voted this down because they just didn't have the funds to do this, and they didn't really think that it was necessary to pay them early. Hoover is going to order the army to disperse the bonus army. So you have two very young generals at the time: General Douglas MacArthur, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and then General Patton, who's a bit older. He was a war hero in World War One. But they are sent to the lawns of the White House to break up and launch tear gas on World War One veterans that are looking for their money. Obviously, when this hit the papers, it was not a very good look for President Hoover. Over the course of time, General MacArthur and Eisenhower did enough to kind of overshadow this dark spot on their military careers, but this is going to be a really bad look for Hoover. And 1932 is when he's kind of running for re-election. He knows that he does not stand a chance in the re-election, but this kind of put the nail in the coffin. And then lastly, the legacy of Herbert Hoover is right here. All right, they're called Hoovervilles. So when people lost their money, lost their homes, and were forced to kind of sleep on park benches, as you see right here, or live in these shanty towns of like cardboard huts. Central Park was actually one of the biggest Hoovervilles in America in 1931 and 1932, where people, again, they didn't have homes, so they lived in kind of cardboard boxes or makeshift shacks. They're called shanty towns. Every country has a very poor place where there are shanty towns. They sprung up all across the United States: Chicago, Washington, D.C., as you see in the picture here, New York City. And the people who lived in these little shanty towns eventually called them Hoovervilles. This is because they kind of blamed Hoover for the Depression. They blamed the Republicans for the stock market crash, and Hoover is going to kind of earn the nickname the Do Nothing President. Going to shorten it to Prez here, which really echoes in that idea of the Hoovervilles are named after him, and people who lost their homes are going to blame him for everything that happened and for not doing enough to fix it. These are some more examples of Hoovervilles right here. So again, people very, very, very poor living in these kind of makeshift shanty towns, and they're called Hoovervilles. And I believe that's it. Yeah, so that's it for this PowerPoint presentation. You guys know your work for the week. If you have questions, please email me. If you've got comments, please email me. Book me for a one-on-one session, and we can kind of chat. Also, in those one-on-one sessions, if you want to talk about your IAs and the work that you should have done up to this point, I'm more than game to talk about the IA process. And the next time that I see you guys in a flip, it will be on Unit 20.5, which is the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal, which is going to be super exciting. And I've got a couple good ideas to kind of keep you guys engaged in that, where it's not just going to be Cornell notes and answering some questions. I've got some project ideas in the works. So hopefully you guys have fun in that unit, because it's super important and, in my opinion, super interesting how FDR kind of came in and really revamped the American government and helped out the average person. So I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of first virtual unit. And as always, be good.